if I can just say thank you, Mitch, for agreeing to do this and for making time. I'm really looking forward to my discussion with you as a significant thought leader, especially in the arts world in Miami, but also globally through your work over decades in this city, but again, also around the globe. Getting a real sense from you would be interesting for me to hear your perspectives on this extraordinary moment that we're in. So thank you. Not everybody watching this might know you, so why don't you tell us who you are, your role now, and a little bit of your journey so we know who we're talking to.
So I'm Mitchell Kaplan, and I'm the owner of Books and Books. And we've been a bookstore for almost 40 years now in Miami. It's been a long time. I started in 1982, and I started in Coral Gables. It was a very small 500 square foot bookshop. What brought me to do that, what brought me to that point in my life was that I'm a native from Miami Beach, believe it or not. And the Arsht Center incorporates part of the Sears building, which is where I bought my first bicycle when I was a kid. So I've been a long time in Miami, and I went to school at the University of Colorado. I studied English. Somewhere along the line, I developed this idea that I wanted to be a part of literary culture. I think I thought I'd be a writer, or maybe get involved in publishing in some way. But literary culture always fascinated me, to the point where writers were my heroes. Writers were the apotheosis of what you could be in American culture, or in culture in general. And so I took a few detours. I went to law school, which immediately made me reassess what it was I wanted to do. So after 2 years, I left law school with the idea that I would really focus on doing something in the literary world. And I just happened to drift back to Miami. I was in DC. I didn't really expect to stay here, but I needed to earn a living. And at the time, the University of Miami had a Masters of English program that allowed you to teach high school English. So I got that master's at the University of Miami, and the school where I did my student teaching is where I taught English. So that kept me here. And I also met my wife to be during that period. She's still my wife, Rochelle. And so I stayed in Miami, and I said, you know, I'm going to do what I really want to do after 3 years of teaching. And it wasn't that I left teaching. I told the woman who hired me that I was indeed going to open a bookshop when she hired me. So she knew what she was getting. And after 3 years, I opened a very tiny little bookshop in Coral Gables. But it was the time when independent bookstores were everywhere. 50% of all books sold at that time were sold through independent bookstores. It's hard to believe, really, given where we are now in the world. And so in Miami, even at the time, there were probably a dozen independent bookstores that of all kinds, small, large, in the malls, outside the malls, but there were lots of them. And we existed very well with the chains, because the chains, as I say, were mostly in the malls at the time. It was B. Dalton and Walden and that sort of thing. But I always loved the idea of bookstore as gathering place. So a lot of independent stores at the time had the same idea, but it was also the rise of the author reading, or the author event. And you'll be very happy to hear that our very first author event was with John Houseman, the actor. He did our very first author event with us. The second was with Isaac Singer, the Nobel Prize winning writer. And so from the beginning, we were kind of event-based and experiential-based. The bookstore was very beautiful. It was all floor. It looked very much like our Coral Gables store, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and all of that. But it was only 500 square feet. So basically, I learned on the job. I had no business background. Some people would say I still am learning on the job, which I am. But To be part of this community of independent booksellers has been, one of the most gratifying things that I could possibly do. It's an amazing world to be a part of, this literary world of ours. In many ways, the literary world is kind of the R&D for the rest of the art world to a large extent. You know how many films come from books, how many plays, To Kill a Mockingbird on Broadway has been a huge hit. So it's been really fascinating. So over the 40 years, some of my best friends are writers and publishers and that sort of thing. So it was a great choice that I made. Maybe not the most lucrative choice, but that never always, motivated me. So at heart, I think at heart, there's still that kind of, writer living in a garret sensibility that has always been a part of me, that is still there. But I'm not going to lie that I think I've embraced business in a way that has allowed me to survive. I learned that was very important for me as well.
Well, and of course for the Arsht Center, it's really wonderful to have a books and bookstore on our campus, and the great partnership that we have with you and the coffee shop there to animate the experience for our theater goers is just a beautiful marriage between the two worlds. So that's great too. How has your coming to COVID now, how has your world been impacted by this, Mitch?
Oh, it's been, with the virus, it's turned it upside down, basically. All of our shops are closed right now. I put it this way, that, just the way people who have pre-existing conditions are more susceptible to the virus, we as a business had a pre-existing condition that made us more susceptible to the virus. Mm-hmm. That pre-existing condition is what our mission was, which is to have people gather in large, in large groups, to have people, the same as the Arsht, to have people socially interact. The whole idea of social interaction is exactly what we were striving for in everything we did, in presenting authors, in having cafes, in having the Café at the Arsht. So, it hit us really hard because it went to the very core of what we do. So we've had to close everything down. At first I had to furlough, 90% of my employees, basically. We did keep an online business, which we still have. So you can go to booksandbooks.com and you can order your books from us. Soon we're going to start, probably at the Gable store, we're going to start curbside pickup. We may do that at the Arsht too, given the fact that we have the curbside pickup at the restaurant. But my goal in life was not to be an online bookseller. That was not my mission in life. My mission was to create places where people came and discussed things and met other people, and the world of ideas was there. The very, very same thing that you do at the Performing Arts Center. And I'm sure we've had the same challenges.
Yeah, I think like us, you probably feel you've lost your voice in a way, the voice that you felt you had to articulate to connect community and build community, and that voice has to change now. I wonder whether you could just share a few thoughts about what you think the role of the arts, literary or other arts, all arts. What's the role that we as arts practitioners and art makers can play and should play during this time?
That's I think, a fundamental question right now. What's really interesting is that during this period of time, with people being isolated in their homes, what you're finding is that they are turning to the arts in order to make that time in their homes palatable and to find meaning. in what they're going through right now. And I think that that is a metaphor really for what it is we do. What we do is we try to interpret the world. We try to give comfort in this crazy world of ours. We try to create catharsis for people to work out their own issues that they have. We provide entertainment for people as well. So I think the importance of the arts has come into clear focus during this time. It's not like the arts has been, for many people now, it is the arts that is sustainable. I saw a very interesting piece on the news last night about a challenge that was given, an online challenge, to, while you're at home, recreate a famous, a masterwork of painting. And it was really, did you see that piece? It was really, really interesting. The amount of time that people took to do that. How many musicians are doing, live from their home sets, acoustic sets of what they do? I've spent hours watching that. How many people have we lost during this time? In popular culture, people like John Prine, an amazing musician that I've always loved, who no longer is with us. And, so I've been listening to his music a lot. So to answer your question is the essential question, what do the arts give us? And I think in a time of despair, it is that we turn to the arts for sustenance, for so many different things. And then it'll be, what's so interesting to me, it'll be, what comes out of it? What art is created from this? I mean, I'm waiting for the great novels to come from this, or the great pieces of music, or the plays, or art, or whatever happens. But this is a seminal event in our lifetimes. I don't know of any, I lived through the Vietnam War, all of that sort of thing, which had a huge cultural impact. You talk about 9/11, you can talk about the civil rights movement. This is something, when you lose, close to 70,000 people in a period of a month, the effect is just numbing in so many different ways.
And I think the impact of this one in the strangest way is also because it is so non-discriminating and global. So it's not just a problem in Vietnam with a war or in New York with 9/11. It is just everybody feeling attacked or deprived of humanity through this time, and in the strangest way that connects the world in a way that I don't think we've been connected for a long, long time. And throughout history, when these really big global catastrophes, world wars or whatever, occur, it seems that the arts are always at the rebirth moment, the first thing. What do you think our roles will be, should be, when we get to the other side of this pandemic? How do we play a part in our community then at that moment?
I think that my role as a bookseller and a bookstore owner will be to help people make sense of it, is to highlight those books that are relevant to what we just went through, and to curate for people who might not know what is out there, and show them what's there, and at the same time mount events and gatherings in which all of this can be discussed. I would also like to encourage the younger generation, the earlier generation, people who are not of my generation, who are going to have to live that much, who are going to live beyond this. And they're going to have to somehow incorporate that into what their point of view of the world might be. I think it also, it's hard, it's hard to depoliticize the arts in a lot of ways, particularly when you go through something like this. I think you can't, I'm not saying that what we need to do is have, polemic kinds of art. But what I'm saying is that the role of the artist as well is to not turn their eye to what this virus has pointed out in the world. It's pointed out the inequity, it's pointed out the holes in our safety net, in this country and around the world. It's pointed out the role of the incredible disparity between the rich and the poor. You said earlier that the virus is indiscriminate, but it is up to a point. It's been shown that if you are, of more means, if you have health care, if you happen to be not Black or Latino, the chances of you dying from it are far less in that way. So I think that is another role that the arts can play in a very, in a very artful way, pointing that out and getting people to understand that we need to be a little bit more activist sometimes as well.
Yeah, that's a very, very sober perspective. The virus itself is indiscriminate, but our systems and our societal ways of managing our society is sadly discriminate, and so some will suffer more from the same virus.
You put that well. That's my view about it, actually.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. So live arts, of course, has the challenge of togetherness, closeness, and bring in your industry, as you said earlier, bringing people together um, to breathe together, literally in the same space, is where we get our energy from, and where we think we have our biggest value. Will that be impacted in a long-lasting way by where it currently has to go, which is online, which is virtual?
That's a wonderful question. What is happening? The fact that we're doing this has changed my life. I had never been on a Zoom before in my life, before this thing happened. And I think what that does is it opens up possibilities. I don't think it limits what we do. I think the fact that we're now able to use technology in a different way will open up possibilities. Imagine what we can do in the Arsht, getting people from around the world on a Zoom screen to do a special event. The other night I saw an event, I think it was the Center for Fiction did an event, which had a poet, a musician, and then somebody else, all on a screen, and they all did sort of an interactive performance. So I think technology will actually open things up. I think in the short term, in the very short term, we may see, as everything is closed and people are hesitant, and before we have a vaccine, we may see this virtual world kind of replace, the real experience or the physical experience in the short term. But I think once that's over, and it will be over, I think people will come back to wanting to experience being together, because that is what we do as humans. We're together and we want to be together. And I've been thinking a lot about the Arsht and about your challenges as a venue. And in many ways, I think you have a lot of challenges, but because of the size of your venues, I think you also have a lot of possibilities. In other words, it's easy. I think it's all about people's feeling safe. And I think people can feel more safe in a place like the Arsht than they would in a movie theater, let's say, that doesn't have as much social distance. Whether or not it's economically feasible to limit the kinds of audiences that you would have to limit it to make people feel safe. You do have a hall that has 2,000 people or whatever, but what would it look like with 500 people in it? And how do you make that work? So I think there are some real opportunities in the interim. But your question about will we be changed in the future, I think the answer is we will be, but it will also be an opportunity. I don't think we will lose what you and I love so much, which
Yeah.
is live performances, live authors, browsing in a bookstore, going to an art museum. I don't think that'll be lost.
I think you're right. At least I agree with that point of view. And I'm finding some energy and inspiration from the moment of great possibilities of creating some sort of a hybrid experience between the old and the new in this bridge moment when we slowly ease back into a new normal. And maybe some of those things, like after other crises, some elements will stay with us forever because they're good ideas, they're good
Right.
changes. Crises have a way of accelerating trends that are underlying anyway, and so yes, I have to find some inspiration in that rather than feeling it as a threat, and so I agree with you. One last question to you, Mitch. You're such a thoughtful consumer, but supporter of artists, authors, and artists in general. Um, they're going through a really tough time, especially performing artists. I imagine authors can still sit and write, and often they do it alone. So I guess I'm not going to say their lives haven't changed, but they can still practice their art. But what would you say to artists at this time?
Well, it's another great question. In the literary world, what's happening is that writers are scrambling right now. People who are publishing books, if you have a book coming out right now, it's just horrific for you because you have nowhere really, you don't have a real platform to be able to sell it or to get it out there. So it's really, there's a lot of scramble going on. If you've got a book contract and you're writing, or if you're just a poet and you're writing, and you can do that in a solitary way. If you're a musician, clearly it's got to be just killing you in terms of not being able to get together with your orchestra and dealing with that. The only thing I would say is it will end. I want to end on a moment of hope. I think this will end, and it's a matter of us just getting through it, and sustaining yourself and taking care of yourself. And as I was talking to someone else recently, I was saying, how are you doing? What are you up to? And they said, I'm using this time to write. I'm using I didn't know I had it in me to write, but I'm using this time to write. And I think that if you're an artist, you've got you're operating a number of different levels. On the financial level, it's probably really, really hurting. And I think we need to look to wherever we can to try to sustain artists in that way. But I think there's an end in sight. I think there will be a vaccine at some point, and then people will feel, that they have it under control, and they'll start getting back together. But, I wish that I had a magic word to be able to comfort people completely. But
Well, Mitch, I look forward to the day when you and I can sit in Books and Books on the Arsht campus and share a glass of something and celebrate that we've come to the other side. But in the meantime, your words are very encouraging to artists. Thank you. And thank you for doing this. I really appreciate this. It's been great to talk to you. I
this
really
is
appreciate that.
fantastic. I thank you very, very much.